Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bean Studios. I'm live here with Mike Bielawski. Did I say that right, Mike?
Yep.
Welcome, Mike. Mike is one of the contributors and writers for the Vermont Daily Chronicle. He covers a lot of the stuff that happens in Montpelier and really all over the state. And you said that you're also a writer for Vermont. Keep Vermont Safe. Am I wrong about that?
That's right. KeepVermontSafe.com. It's police matters. Police issues. A lot of press releases I cover, but all over the state, local police departments, state police, especially Burlington, of course.
Yeah.
Just any crimes that happen or bills that passed in the state house related to crime. I have a story that just went up to, or I don't know if it's up yet or not, but I can say what it's about. It's this is the headline that may or may not appear as the final headline: state to prevent federal and local cooperation on illegal immigration. This is about the fair and impartial policing policy that they push both in communities and statewide, and it has been updated statewide to include a number of things that police will no longer, state or local police will no longer be able to do when it pertains to illegal immigration by the northern border.
So this is something that you have published today. This is going to be published today in the Vermont Daily Chronicle, or is it going to be published tomorrow?
This will probably be in both. It would be on Keep Vermont Safe first, and I sent this one in yesterday, so I'm just looking it up right now to see if it's up yet or not. But if it's not up yet, it will probably be up today. So I don't see it there right now, but it should be up today. And these are the kind of stories we do. So they modified the policy for what police can or cannot do in regards to illegal or suspected illegal immigrants.
So I want to hear more about that. We should definitely get into some of the stuff that you're covering. But I mentioned to you before we came on the show, and for anyone wondering, I'm covered in paint today. I am painting here at the Bean Studios, doing a little work. Thanks to everybody who's contributed to the Daily Chronicle, coming down to the Creemee stand. We're able to make some upgrades to our facility. So anyway, I want to talk a little bit, Mike, about who you are and how you got into working with the Vermont Daily Chronicle, how you got to know Guy, and really how you got into news as a whole. Because I think there's a lot of writers, a lot of readers of Vermont Daily Chronicle who maybe they see your work, they know who you are, at least on print or on the screen, but they might not know you. Like they don't see you like they seen Guy and I. So why don't you talk to us a little about that?
Okay. Well, I used to be in the State House more often, and I'm kind of guilty of taking advantage of the new, everything's over a screen now. And
as we all are.
But I plan to be in there, physically more often in the future. But I started with media. I really knew I wanted to be a journalist all my life, starting all the way back when I was like in elementary school. Originally, I wanted to write about like video games and like sports and the Red Sox, and that's what I thought I would do. I'll review movies, I'll write about sports. This will be great. And then as I got older and closer to college, I started to realize a couple of things. Number one, a lot of that stuff, maybe not so much today, but back then, you really had to be on the West Coast for anything like games or movie related. And sports writing too, it kind of had its own logistical challenges.
Absolutely. Being in Vermont, right? I mean,
yeah. So naturally, I started like probably 90% of all journalists do, covering like local select board meetings and school board meetings, writing for small community papers. Like the Hardwick Gazette was the first one I wrote for here in Vermont, and gosh, that was over 10 years ago now. We arrived in Vermont, I think I want to say the summer of 2014.
Okay.
I immediately started working with the Hardwick Gazette, and I immediately, kind of a funny story, I immediately kind of learned who Guy Page was when I got here, even though I didn't work for him for many years later. So he used to work with newspapers for like, I don't want to misquote, but I think like promoting material, sharing material, like sending news stories to papers and asking like, will you run these and whatnot. And apparently he used to have a relationship with the editors and staff. I don't know if I'll name them on air, but at the Hardwick Gazette from like the 2000s and maybe even into in the 2010s. But at some point that relationship must have went awry, because I never heard, I don't want to say kind words, but the Hardwick Gazette, like many publications, like most publications in Vermont and elsewhere, they very ideologically, focused on their beliefs, and they are not. I just have to say, frankly, not the beliefs of Guy Page, I think, and a lot probably us as well.
Sure.
It's just the way it is. The local newspapers, you pick them up, even the ones that are lucky enough to be privately owned, they're left wing. Let's just be frank, they're left wing papers. And so when
they're
Guy
in
Page,
Vermont. I mean, it's kind of the way it is up here, unfortunately.
It's unfortunate there can't be a little more balance in that regard. And I almost want to get away from saying left wing, right wing. I just think it's just they're in that establishment zone.
Absolutely.
They parrot what they hear on the VPR and the VT Digger, which are part of the Vermont Journalism Trust Foundation and part of the larger establishment media, and they just don't break from the narratives.
No.
So I think Guy Page and eventually myself, I eventually parted ways with the Hardwick Gazette, not just because of I wanted to work somewhere bigger and cover the State House, but also we just weren't seeing eye to eye.
Yeah, well, just real quickly, I want to make sure that I have a comment from one person. Mike King writes sound ? I do believe the sound is on. Our sound should be working.
Oh, okay. Should I speak a little closer?
No, I think you're fine. Maybe sit a little bit closer. Like I try to keep the mic like a fist away, which is a relatively good rule. But it could be something on his end too. Just if you still can't hear us, Mike, please let us know. We hope that you are. For that matter, I think it's really interesting what you talked about. I first gotten into the idea of being a journalist and wanting to do any type of journalism at all. I was thinking the same thing. I want to cover sports. But then I slowly realized, well, there's probably more important stuff to cover.
Yeah,
believe it or not.
For me too. Yeah.
So we do have a comment from Stephen Nichols, and he asks, what is your feeling of local newspaper coverage is one-sided? What is your feeling of local newspaper coverage is one-sided? Example, local media reporting only one side of the government, not include taxpayer vision.
Yeah. So I think that is the problem is again, getting back to the establishment media. I'll never forget, I took at Seton Hall University, we're going back like 20 years now, probably 2005, media criticism was the name of the class, and my professor, Professor Nyberg, who actually emailed like a year ago, she's still there.
Wow.
Bless her. She's still kicking. Anyway, she put down a chart on everybody's desk in the classroom that looked like a family tree. But it wasn't a family tree. Well, it was a family tree, but not a family. It was media. So at the middle, you had your Disney and Viacom and Fox News of the world. And then as it branched down, you got into like your smaller, maybe magazines and cable networks. And then finally at the bottom was like your local little newspapers that if you were a person not familiar with how media works, you might think, well, those are just owned by my community, or those are owned by, the local guy who's in the office. And sometimes that's the case, but more often than not, I think that's not the case. And how this pertains to what the commenter was saying was that's how it gets controlled, because when you have that family tree controlling not only what they say, but all further down the branches to the little papers, then you're getting the one-sided reports where you only hear about the agenda at the State House by the establishment party or the ruling party, and not the poor taxpayer who just opened a restaurant and is actually doing a lot of business but can barely make a profit at all. And that's a true story that I also posted about on social media.
Well, it just goes back to that point that like a lot of these organizations, these media organizations, quote unquote, are just like an arm of one of the establishment. Yeah. The establishment. Yeah. They're an arm of the establishment, and you could call that the Vermont Democrats.
Yeah.
But
right
ultimately,
now it is.
It is here.
It is right now.
It is here. But if you were to take this and translate it elsewhere around the country, there's other places where it would be totally dominated by Republicans, and it's the same. As that, and so I think that's why you said the point. Like, I don't really want to get into this like left wing versus right wing thing.
Yeah.
But it's just like wherever it's more convenient for the establishment that ultimately controls the world.
Yeah.
In the nation, for that matter, where they have a lot of grip. It does not matter to them which party it is, but can you talk a little bit more about like VT Digger, for example? Like, I don't think a lot of our viewers and a lot of people ultimately in Vermont quite really realize how they're funded and how how that group works. And, they are an impressive organization in terms of, well, exactly. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I'll be frank. I haven't read VT Digger in a while.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I read them as a source for my stories sometimes. If I'm writing a story and they covered it, I will, and I credit them, of course, when I do. But the problem, again, it gets back to the family tree and the establishment media. So the Vermont Journalism Trust Foundation, I believe I'm saying that right. It's a group of, I don't know the exact size of the board, but it's like a dozen people. And I don't know who the current names are or what their careers or backgrounds are, but I guarantee you, if you were to look right now, you would find they're wealthy, influential, powerful people. Many of them, I would like to think most of them are there for the right reasons and with a good heart, but
I think they
they're
are
laden in special interest.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is you end up. I'll share a story going back to my Vermont Watchdog days, which was before my True North days, which was also before my Vermont today. In any case, going back like 7 or 8 years in media. All right, so I'm covering a state house, Vermont Watchdog. I just left the Hardwick Gazette, or I might have still been working with them a little bit. And I was covering the I can't remember what the bill was, but it had to do with wind turbines and solar panels. The lawmakers were trying to decide how many of this stuff should we have, and what will it cost, and how will we install it, and how much say will communities have, and what goes where, or whether they're going to have turbines or panels or not. All of the above. And so we were talking about turbines and how they go on top of the mountains. For those who are familiar with wind turbines on top of mountains, there's a lot of controversies. Ironically, from an environmental standpoint, when a layperson hears wind turbine, they think, oh, green, wonderful, doesn't hurt the earth at all.
It's going to save the planet.
Right, going to save the planet. Actually, there's a lot of irony in all that, especially with the wind turbines, because there's a whole litany of very serious problems that they create. Annette Smith over at Vermonters for a Clean Environment is the expert in the state about all this, but I will speak to it as best I can briefly. They have to blow off the tops of the mountains to build them, like literally dynamite the tops of the mountains. So whatever runoff and destruction that causes, there's that. Once they're built, they're massive. These things, some of them are like 500 feet tall. There's something called, I forgot, it's been so long ago, I can't remember the exact scientific term for it, but they put out vibrations that you would not hear like through your ears, but you can feel them in your bones and you can feel them in your body, and animals and people. This is not just one or the other. And so what they found is when they build these things, suddenly the wildlife just clears away, can't be there anymore. People end up selling their homes for a fraction of the price they bought it for, and they don't get any compensation because they can't sleep at night. There's been all kinds of scientific studies about the impacts going out like a mile or two at least from some of these massive wind turbine farms and the communities that have to live near them. And my point in telling all this, to get back to VT Digger, all right, to get back to the original question.
Sure.
So I was at a committee, some kind of committee hearing where they were hearing the experts talk about what I just mentioned, the problems with the environment and problems with the blowing off the tops of the mountains. Yeah. And the VT Digger reporter, I kind of remember his name, but I won't say it anyway. I'm pretty sure he's not there anymore. But he got up and left when the guys came up to talk about the problems with the turbine. So he was there. The VT Digger reporter was there when they were talking about how great they are and why we need them and why it's going to be great. But when the other professionals came on with a different view to say, wait, these have problems, they're going to hurt the environment, they're going to hurt people, the economics are horrible. We could do a whole show on the economics of some of these green energy. And anybody who thinks they're saving money with these things, no. Anyway, so they got up and took their lunch break the reporter they had there got up and I assumed took their lunch break while the lady or guy, I can't remember, was talking about all these things I just mentioned with the problems with wind turbines. And this is the kind of thing I've seen time and time again with the corporate media. I mean, they're frankly the corporate media at the State House is they will report according to what they feel or frankly what their investors and paychecks feel.
Well, yeah.
To be frank.
Oh, I think the point that you're making though is becoming increasingly obvious to a lot of Vermonters that not only is the Democratic Party funded and controlled by really corporations. I mean, that's what's so funny about it. Yeah. Corporations, and
they got their hands into Republicans too.
Well, absolutely. And I'm not going to pretend like that's not the case. But what we're talking about is the establishment that's in control.
Right now, they're undeniably the establishment party in Vermont.
They are, and they act like supposedly, oh, well, we're for the people, we're for the working class, we're for the poor Vermonters, the most vulnerable, you name it. But ultimately, they are just funded and controlled by mega corporations who are buying, materials to make their batteries in places in countries like China where there's no regulation and in terms of the environment and for that matter, labor regulation. And we could go on and on and on about that.
Yep.
But the truth is, and I don't know what it's going to take to get some of these people, especially the voters, to understand what they're dealing with. I think what it's going to take is people like you and I and the Vermont Daily Chronicle to continue to just dig in and find out what's going on. Because back to where this is coming from is why we're talking about this is journalism as a whole has also been co-opted by the corporations behind the groups like VT Digger. And for that matter, nothing against Calvin Cutler or Steve Beddix and WPTZ and WCAX. Like those guys I like those guys. They're hard workers. They're young workers. But those groups are completely controlled by the media corporations. And for that matter, you can just go watch their advertisements to figure out who funds them. It's really not that hard to figure out. A lot of it is the green energy sector, especially within WCAX. But anyway, back to what we were talking about. So what do you think it's going to take to get the public to figure this out?
Well, shows like this one. I think that this podcast is great.
Cool. Glad to have you on.
Yeah. This is a great start, and just keep doing what we're doing. You and Guy Page and me and whoever else we can get on board. I know John Clark, you said, is coming in tomorrow.
Yeah, hopefully tomorrow he'll be here around noon, same time, or 2 p.m. I'm not sure yet. I'll have to call him.
I will say, so I'm 41 now. I started doing journalism, right out in college, really, so about 20 years now. I've only had it as my primary job since for about 15 years, like as far as main income goes. But in any case, a long time. And my point in saying all that is I've never, in my, I guess, 2 decades-ish doing, I'll call it alternative media journalism, like non-establishment.
Sure.
Pays me less money.
Yes, it does.
But that's just the reality. Well, not anymore. That's changing too, though, I'll have to say, because alternative media is rising. But it used to be you always made less money in alternative media. It's growing. There is, I think, I can't help but, I don't mean to get dorky here, but I can't help but think back to, remember when 2012 was like this big thing in the Mayan calendar?
And we were all going to die.
They said we're all going to die, and then some more optimistic people are like, we're all going to awaken. This is going to be the new renaissance of humanity.
I like where you're going with this.
Right. And I think the Mayans, God bless them, I think they were 12 years off. I think that everything they said was going to happen in 2012 is actually coming to a fruition in 2024.
I want to hear more about this. What are you talking about?
I think that the anger is boiling over in the public. They know they've been getting lied to by the corporate media. They know that they're obviously their mortgages and their expenses are going awry, and they can't. Not everyone can quite put their finger on it, but even the folks that have been kind of on the sidelines politically over the years, they're starting to figure out, okay, we're getting lied to about a lot.
What you're saying is so very true, and I see this in my own day-to-day with family and friends who otherwise they never question a lot of this stuff and perhaps even called me crazy over the years. But if you're somebody like us, by the way, I mean, you went to school for journalism, right? Media. So if you're somebody like us who has been studying this stuff for a while, we were just lucky to be ahead of the curve. Because we could see what was coming down the pipeline. But I couldn't agree with you more. And just to share a little bit from my own perspectives, like during quote unquote wake up to a lot of this stuff, when I started to really question the news coverage that I was consuming, when I started to really think about myself, if I ever wanted to be one of these types of people, and then heading, of course, in 2020, it was like, wow, I am so glad I got to see this when I saw this, because now the whole world is in for like a total wake-up call. And I think that is what we're experiencing right now. But I want to hear more from your perspective. What does that look like? What does that look like in the public, and what does it look like from what you're seeing?
Well, it's changing media landscape, definitely. Like I just alluded to a moment ago, it used to be if I wanted to work in a non-establishment media outlet, like what we're doing now,
sure,
I would be taking a huge pay cut. And I'm not saying I'm making bank now. I'm paid we're I don't know what you're paid, but we're paid a fair amount.
We're paid fair. I'm paid fair.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
But my point in bringing that up is that's changing too. This is, I think, capitalism, American capitalism at its most brilliant. So the corporate media got taken over, Everybody's getting lied to for decades, probably,
since the 80s.
Really, yeah. And really going back further than that,
that's true, but I think there's a lot
worse.
That got really bad. That's from what I understand. Like Sinclair started buying up all the smaller little radio stations and TV stations. But anyway, sorry.
No, that's definitely important to point out. But my point in saying all this is so that happened. So we have this entire generation that has been largely getting misinformation on nearly everything. And I won't go down the list right now.
Yeah, pretty much everything.
Pretty much all the big developments and issues we've been getting the corporate media side, the controlled corporate media side, with other people's agendas, not the public's, in mind. And so I think this is the brilliance, again, of American capitalism. So someone like me or you can come around and say, okay, there's a demand now that we can literally capitalize on. And I saw it, and apparently you saw it, and Guy Page saw it. And so we said, okay, people need the truth. The truth is a hot commodity, especially right now.
Yeah.
People are willing to pay money for the truth.
Well, I'll make the point, and I'm not necessarily sure that it's anything that like we even realized what we were seeing. I mean, just to be totally fair, I mean, I don't think any of us could have saw it exploding at the rate that it did. I will say about 2 years ago, I knew that everything was going to change. But even then, I wasn't sure that I would ever end up in media. I just knew that at least a big perspective shift within the public was going to happen. Because ultimately, I mean, I talk about this all the time with like my dad, for example, and his family. We own this building, and like they've been very gracious enough to let me do this show in here. And I think it's because who, by the way, they've consumed corporate media most of their lives. They realize like this thing that's happening right now with social media. With the internet and with just independent alternative media, it's an explosion. Right. It's an explosion of human creativity and freedom like we've never seen before. It's potentially as impactful as the printing press to some degree. I mean, I would make that argument that it is because you no longer need you don't. It's like back in the old days. You need to know somebody who had a big printing press, or a big company that could do that, especially way back. And that was very skilled, and like in the people that own those presses, like they were very serious about what they were going to be used for. And even still today, but if you take that to today too, you take media organizations such as CBS and all of their affiliates across the nation, to get on their printing presses takes a little bit of that takes a lot too. But we don't even need to do that. We can just do it right here on our own. I mean, this is totally crazy, man. It's radical, really.
Yeah, I know. When we started at True North Reports, well, Vermont Watchdog before that. I've always been on the writer side of the business. I've never dealt with like not even editing, the publishing, not really. But the editors would share every once in a while. We get in conversations. They'll share what's the readership? Are we growing? Are we shrinking? We were generally growing year over year ever since I got to Vermont. Whether it be Vermont Watchdog, which later kind of became True North Reports, which later is now kind of branched onto our sort of now frankly that just became the part of the Vermont Daily Chronicle. And I hear it from Guy Page as well, and I won't share like internal. He actually shares internal numbers right now. That's like the leading story on the on Vermont Daily Chronicle right now. It's the top one is about we are growing, and he's saying we want to grow more, and that's great. And again, getting back to the capitalism thing, I mean I wonder, is this what the founders envisioned? I mean, I don't think they had that much foresight, but it really worked brilliantly that here's this huge demand now for the truth, and people like you and me are able to literally capitalize on it, hence capitalism.
Sure.
And bring truth out, and make money to live and or feed a family or whatever, doing that. So I think that's great.
I actually think that they maybe not had the foresight to ever see the internet coming, but they understood the concept freedom of speech, which is ultimately freedom of information to some degree, especially this day and age. And I think that they saw that. I think they saw that clearly. If you want to get that mic just a little bit close, I'm sorry, your mic, right? No worries.
It keeps drifting away.
Well,
from the
it's okay. I just want to make sure that we have the sound.
Hope everyone can hear all right.
Yeah, I think they can, but I do think that your point is 100% true. Like, I think they saw that this was a potential, and I think this is something that we as Americans, I don't take it for granted, but I think a lot of people take it for granted, the concept that we do have freedom of speech. I think a lot of people think that that's just something that you were born with and nobody ever died for it. Well, guess what? a lot of people died for it.
Yeah, they did. They sure did.
And I think that we got to take it.
I think
we got to take it seriously. I mean, we're broadcasting live right now on X. Thanks to Elon Musk, by the way, for that matter, who I have some judgments of, but the fact that he's got this app going and it's as free as it is, and they're letting people do it really safe. I mean, pretty much whatever you want. I mean, I think that's all. I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
I would say, and I've said it before on social media, I think Elon Musk, and again, I don't agree with him on everything, but the principles of free speech, and I'll never forget when he first took over Twitter, he kind of pulled a prank where he walks into the lobby at the main Twitter headquarters, wherever that is.
Yeah, it's in San Francisco.
Right, and he's carrying a kitchen sink in his hands as he comes through the big glass door, and he yells to everyone, is like, let that sink in, or free speech is back, let that sink in. and I thought that was really funny and also powerful at the same time. And it feels like I was using Twitter before he took over, and now we're using it after he took over.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I do think there's a difference.
It's my favorite app.
Yeah.
By a long shot.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I love it.
I think having a major platform that is, I will say, relatively free. I do know that even under Elon Musk, there are still certain websites that I feel like you should be able to share freely that you maybe cannot, and I need to investigate more, so I won't say which ones. But it feels like there's still a small fraction of the censorship that was there before. Hopefully that will go away too. But it's definitely a way more free and open platform than I think it was under, what was the other guy? I already forgot his name.
I can't think of his name either.
But anyway, the one before Elon Musk.
Jack Dorsey.
Right.
I don't even know if Jack Dorsey technically owned it though, and Elon bought it. I can't remember how that all shook out. But anyhow, I will say I have a guest coming on potentially next week, who he lives down in Florida. He's going to be a virtual guest, lives down in Miami, and he's got some pretty interesting theories on Elon Musk and his family background and who he's related to and some of this stuff, which would be interesting.
Yeah.
Because let's be real, I mean, multi-billionaire, richest man in the world, you got to have some pretty who knows what types of connections you have, but I'd be interested.
I'm sure he does.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure it's not all great, but for that matter, I think that's where I think a lot of the shift is coming from, though. I think that even in elite circles, quote unquote, there's a shift in perspective and a shift in consciousness, even where they're saying, wait a second, why do we want to control everything and everybody? Maybe there's a better way. Is that possible? Is it possible that there's a better way?
Yeah.
I mean,
I want to share. I brought a prop.
Oh, cool! Yeah.
So I think it's related to everything we're talking about. So I may as well just introduce it. I got this at the Montpelier Library.
Ooh.
Bad boy.
1984, the graphic novel George Orwell. For anyone who can't read that,
yeah, it's the graphic
listening.
novel. I said bad boy. I guess books are gender neutral, but I'm gonna say it prefers to be
a bad boy.
Bad boy. But that might be offensive to someone, so I'll apologize.
Well, if they're watching this show and they're getting offended over that, they got bigger things to worry about.
I actually haven't started reading it yet. I started to have my. I don't know what even the rules are for showing books on camera, so maybe you can see the cover. I know that's all right, but it's definitely graphic, and I actually got it from my oldest son who's 12, but after letting him read the first chapter or two, my wife and I actually decided we're going to hold off for a few more years, even though we both agree it's an important book.
Why'd you hold off?
It's very graphic. The guy or woman or whoever, I guess it's adapted and illustrated by, I'm probably saying this wrong, Matyas Name.
Okay.
In any case, whoever they are, it's like an adult. I think we looked it up. They recommended 14 and up. My oldest son is 12. It's heavy, and if you've ever read the actual book, of course, it is heavy.
It's a dark book.
But to me, this book is like my Bible because, in terms of political thought, because I'll never forget the first time I read it, and I actually never got all the way through it. I got too bummed out halfway through.
Yeah.
I know how it ends, but. The part that blew me away was when the main character, I think Winston, I believe it is.
Yeah, Winston.
He finds a book so this is part of the story now. He finds a book that is supposedly the instruction manual for the elite on how to control everyone. So this is how the super 0.01% of the world control the rest of us and keep us in line. And the main theme of that is fear. So perpetual fear, to be more specific. And in this book, they have 3 super states that are all secretly in cahoots. So it's really one super state, but they're all fighting each other continuously in a war that never ends. And the idea behind this is that they want to. He explains that with the Industrial Revolution in like the 1800s and early 1900s, the elite had a new problem in history. Our production was so much that for the first time in modern history, the lower and middle class could legitimately challenge the elite.
Sure.
And they had to do something about that. So they needed the public to be literally like ditch digging, where you like dig a hole and fill it up again and dig a hole and fill it up again. Because if you're constantly producing stuff, your economy is getting stronger and the elite's grip on the world is going to weaken. So what they came up with in 1984 was they would have 3 states that would pretend to be at war with each other and would actually fight each other in a controlled manner. Nobody would ever quite win. That was the secret.
War is peace.
Yeah, war is peace. Right. And so they're constantly building battleships, and they blow up. They build another battleship, it blows up. And the idea is the middle and lower class can never get out of their rut because they're constantly sending their money towards these wars. Now, this should sound very familiar to anybody following what's going on in Ukraine and
absolutely
and in the Middle East. This is essentially what they're doing right now. Is they've signed on to like a 10-year war that I'm convinced they have no intention of winning. I don't think that anybody on our side thinks they can beat Russia, and I don't think they care. And I bet there's some similar sentiment in the Middle East. I think they really just want to burn our money, literally burn our money. They know that everything we send to Ukraine is going to get literally blown up, and they're probably quite okay with that.
Well, they're okay with it because what's happening ultimately is the dollar is being destroyed.
Right, and I think I want to say I think the green agenda actually matches the narrative of 1984 even better. Because there you really do have a perpetual threat that can never be undone, can never be defeated. Now it's called climate change instead of global warming, so they can just call everything is our fault now. If it rains, if it storms, if we get a flood, doesn't matter if there have been dramatic warm and cold periods as recently as 10,000 years ago. Apparently, we had a major ice age. There was no industrial revolution involved in that. I could talk at length about the problem, very, very serious problems with the data that comes out of the International Panel on Climate Change. That is the main driver of all the bills that we see at the State House saying we need to do this and that with our heating, transportation, and fuel.
Absolutely.
And so I think they took the Orwell formula. They said, okay, we can't have perpetual war forever. People are going to get sick of that. And they did, and they have, so that's great. But then they're like, we need something new. And that's where I think this climate thing emerged from. It's like, well, tell them that the climate's always going to get us. And then
we're at war with the earth.
Or the earth, yep. And so we'll always be building these turbines and these panels that cost literally several times per unit of electricity as the more established and economically viable coal, oil, nuclear, gas, whatever, the stuff that actually runs an economy.
Yeah.
And so that's why I brought 1984. It's a long-winded explanation for why I brought 1984.
And to your point too, I mean, if you've followed what some of the work that I've been doing on geoengineering, it's
yes, I have.
It literally is environmental warfare. Like that. So you're saying it's like a war that the people have gotten sick of. Well, or the people are sick of like actual war. Well, first of all, I would say that they're not, because there's a lot of there's still a lot of Democrats ultimately in this nation, and Republicans for that matter, who agree.
20 years ago, Republicans were driving all the wars.
That's 100% the truth, and that's why I do like the two-party system. That whole thing. It's like it's literally an illusion, just so people can box themselves in terms of the way that they think and the way that they have these conversations. Because then you could say, oh, the Democrats are making us send all this money over Ukraine, and they say, well, what about the Republicans doing? And it's like I don't care.
Mike Johnson, right? He kind of signed on to that.
He did. So it's like, well, it's not one or the other. They're both in the wrong.
Yeah.
But my point though is, there seems to me like there's a lot of people who are still okay with war, and they're happy to continue to see war going on, especially if people are making money on war, which I mean, I believe that the counties surrounding Washington, D.C. are the most wealthy counties on planet Earth. I could be wrong. I don't think I'm misspeaking there. I believe that's Tucker Carlson who talked a lot about that. It's the richest counties on planet Earth, period. In the history of planet Earth, actually. But anyway, so I guess the point, though, that I'm making is the stuff that you're talking about in 1984, It's very real. I almost sometimes wonder if we're in like a mix of like 1984, Brave New World, The Matrix, like all these different books and films, which ultimately kind of bringing up a little bit more the subject of predictive programming. Are you familiar with the phrase predictive programming?
Oh yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, or is that?
Yeah. Well, first I wanted to just give a shout out. You had mentioned Brave New World.
Yes, sir.
It's interesting you said that book because Carol Quigley, the author of Brave New World, was the professor of George Orwell, that was his pen name. His real name. Oh,
I thought Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World.
I'm sorry, August Huxley. Who did I say?
Carol.
Carol Quigley.
Yeah.
That's another interesting character, but no, that was not him. No, you're right. Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World, so I'm flipping my names around a little bit, so I apologize. In any case, he was the professor of George Orwell, which is a pen name. His real name was I forgot. It wasn't I forgot. If you look it up on Google, it'll come up right away. George Orwell is actually the guy's pen name. And interestingly enough, Orwell died barely a year after the book was written, and there's all kinds of conspiracies about that because he worked with the British government when they were occupying India, and that's where apparently he got a lot of the inspiration to write 1984 is because he saw how the British were employing certain techniques to control the population of India before Gandhi kind of came along and called them out. But
Orwell's real name was Eric Arthur Blair.
Okay, yep, Eric Blair, right. And so his professor was that guy you just said.
Eric Arthur Blair.
Yeah. The guy who wrote Brave New World was the professor, the guy who wrote 1984.
Aldous Huxley.
Aldous Huxley. And Aldous.
So he studied under.
Right.
Okay.
So
because those are two very different. Like I think 1984's idea was that like totalitarianism would take over completely, and like you'd see a more like Nazi-esque version of control, and then Brave New World and Aldous Huxley was like people would become slaves to their pleasures, and people would become slaves to the things that they like, and instead of like pursuing life, they would just be like, like they would just like instead, I don't know, like there was a drug I believe called Soma. In the book, where it's like you could take the drug and there was just like no consequences, no pain. It was just like it was like just incredible drug or whatever.
Sounds like fluoride.
It sounds like fluoride. Oh, I was thinking more like I don't know, maybe like
or Prozac, which is actually related to fluoride.
I don't know. I was thinking maybe like marijuana, but even that I think is maybe a little harsh because I don't know. Marijuana is not like it's not like this like I don't know. Some different folks, different strokes for different folks, I guess. But anyhow,
anyway, an opiate of some sort, or metaphorically speaking, an opiate of some sort.
Well, exactly, yeah.
But what I believe Huxley on his deathbed bragged that they would win, that the public would not be able to undo their evil plan to take over the world. Or maybe not on his deathbed, but one of the last speeches that he gave before he died, he actually like kind of bragged like I'm paraphrasing here, but he was kind of like, this is what we're gonna do. No, you can't stop us. You're not gonna be able to overcome us. And I would like to prove him wrong. I hope he's rolling in his grave.
Well, I think that what we're doing right now is proving him wrong. I mean, these people. They're just completely disconnected. Lambert Solly writes, "Hey Paul, we can hardly hear Mike."
Oh no,
Mike! I think
don't want that.
Your mic is. I have it all the way up. Just okay. Lambert, thanks for writing in, Bert Salty. I always appreciate hearing from you.
Oh no, I said so many things out. Should I say everything again?
No, I think they can hear you, but it's like a little far away.
All right, let me move this.
You don't necessarily have to sit like hunched right over it like that. Okay. But if you want to just like pull it a little closer and keep it tight.
Okay.
But I guess where I was going with that is I think we are in some ways in a version of Brave New World mixed with 1984, mixed with The Matrix and a few of these different what do they call these books? Not utopian style books, but dystopian. Utopia. No, they're dystopians ultimately.
Yeah.
I think that we are in some ways living in this world. But we don't have to be afraid. We have nothing to fear. Ultimately, I don't know. I've read all those books and they're interesting, and it's cool to see like, oh, this is what they're doing. This is how they're doing it.
Yeah.
But I personally, I'm not afraid. Yeah. I'm not afraid, which is why I'm sitting here having this
Yeah.
conversation with you. Like, what do I have to be afraid of these people for?
I think as long as we're doing what we're doing, humanity will peel this corrupt elite or whatever you want to call them off of us, and we'll move on. I do believe that. I'm more optimistic now than, believe it or not, I'm more optimistic for humanity now than I was 15 or 20 or 10 years ago, just because, you know, the phrase, like, it's the best of times, worst of times.
Sure.
It definitely looks like the worst of times, but there's a lot of great things happening too.
Well, it's definitely taken me a while to build some faith up, but I've gotten to a point now where I've just kind of accepted that the world is the way that it is, and that you have nothing to fear, and you know, that you can. Well, here we go. We got a comment from Hillary McClure. Glad you mentioned. I'm sorry if I messed up your name, by the way. Glad you mentioned Brave New World. Huxley was a bit of a loony, but adds a whole other dimension, complementary to 1984.
Yeah,
and that's absolutely the case. We are living currently. I think there's a lot of the stuff that you see is like 1984, but I would make the argument a lot of it's even more like
Brave New World.
Brave New World. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to read them both again. I obviously got 1984 right in front of me. I think I have Brave New World somewhere in my house. I read it in high school. Boy, I wish that our reading list in the Vermont high schools would be like the ones when I was a kid. We had to read Brave New World. That was in a reading assignment in our high school. We didn't have 1984 on the list, but that's fine. If you get one of those two books, I think you're getting a good education.
I had to read 1984, and I had to read 1984. I had to read Brave New World. I had to read Fahrenheit 451, which is actually a really good one to throw into this mix. Have you ever read the Fahrenheit?
No.
That's by Ray Bradbury. Do you know the concept of the book?
No, I really don't know
the
anything
idea
about it.
is, instead of firefighters putting out fires, this is ridiculous. Their job is to go anywhere where there are books and burn the books. That's the fire department's job, is to burn all the books.
I think I have heard of this book before.
And instead they have like everybody's walls in their homes are just like giant screens, and there's just like screens everywhere. And like, I think the book was written in the 50s. The guy had incredible foresight. Ray Bradbury. He's written a handful of books. But that's a whole other one. So
I feel like this was made into a movie at some point.
It was. It definitely was.
Okay,
Yeah, no,
that's how I remember it. I don't remember reading it, but I remember a movie that sounds like what you're saying.
So here's what I guess we're about 43 minutes in.
Okay.
I figured we'd go for about, I don't know, an hour or maybe a little bit beyond that. But
okay. Yeah. Anything works for me, as long as I get my kiddos by 3.
Well, yeah, we would definitely make that. Colette Page writes, I'm watching on Facebook and can hear great. And Lambert Solid says, a lot better, Paul, on the volume. So we're doing good now.
Okay.
And thank you, everybody, for keeping us updated. It really makes my job a little bit less complicated. It's helpful to know and to have the feedback. So thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit now about Montpelier this year and your time covering the session. And I know you have some stuff here with you maybe you want to talk about. But what are your thoughts coming out of this session 2024?
Well, I think so. We had the supermajority, of course, and they seem to have had their way.
Yeah.
It seems like I'm not saying nothing will get successfully vetoed. I'm sure there will be, but it seems like they're moving along with the various agendas of the Global Warming Solutions Act, which is a whole litany of like mandates for reducing carbon emissions in heating, electricity, and transportation, and anything else they could think of or adapt to electric. And so that's just one thing. And then they have the social justice agenda. They have the rewriting the school finance formula, which, as you know, you and Guy have talked about, the way I describe it is they kind of reshuffled who's paying for education, but not how much we pay for education.
Yeah.
So there's that.
It's ridiculous.
My wife and I, who are homeowners, we were pretty upset about the way that the property taxes are going. It felt like, to really try to sum it up in a concise way, it felt like a power. The elite, see, there I go calling them the elite. The legislators, who I'm sure some of them are
very elitist. They're elitist,
Yeah,
and I think they're like faux elite though. Like I think they're like the lowest tier, and they think that they're not, but they're just like, they're not that important. They think they are, but
anyway, it feels like they kind of are getting a sense now. There was a poll that came out. I want to say it was either the Ethan Allen Institute or Campaign for Vermont. But one of those two, we had ran it on Vermont Daily Chronicle. This was all the way back in the fall, so this is not current. The legislature so the House and the Senate in Vermont were polled at 49% approval. Now, the reason that's really important is think about this for a second. So we're in election year right now. As of like 6 or 7 months ago now, they were net negative, 49%. So they're underwater popularity-wise.
Sure.
And now they're going into an election. I would say any conventional analyst would say they're screwed going into this election. I am hesitant to commit to that, not because I don't think people aren't upset with them. I think people are very upset with the legislature. And I could literally go on for another hour on this, and I won't.
Yeah, I could too.
But
we'll spare
the
election,
ears. I believe that Vermont has the least secure elections in the world, and I'm not saying that to be dramatic. If you literally look up the election standards for mail-in ballots, electronic voting, both of which are banned in much of the world, and now they want to do this ranked choice voting thing where they literally have to like gather all the ballots and electronic memory chips and stuff and drive them all around in cars. What could go wrong?
Yeah.
And then there's the mail system, which I think anybody with any amount of common sense should be able to say there is not chain of custody control. You don't have to be an election security expert to understand, all right, the mail system does not have chain of custody control to the standard that you would run an election for. It doesn't mean you can't use the mail system in an election, but there's a reason you used to have to request a ballot. Now they mail them to you no matter what.
Let me just say, and I will add, this is probably one of the most controversial topics in America right now. The election. Whether or not there's fraudulent activity, which, look, at a bottom line, in a free and open society, we should absolutely be allowed to talk about this subject without fear of any repercussions or backlash.
Right.
I mean, people that want to disagree, please feel free to disagree. Yeah. But I will say, I ran for office in 2022, and I said constantly, and I believe this to a certain degree, and I want to hear more from your perspective, but I've said constantly, no, the elections in Vermont, they're secure. How could they not be secure? I mean, half the time the person who's counting your votes. Even half the time you might even be related to them, which in my case I am. So, I mean, I can't help but to feel like they're secure.
Right.
That being said, you've mentioned this to Guy and I recently, and you've talked about it a couple times, which leads me to believe you have some information that might be pertinent to our viewers. And so let's talk a little bit about that. What do you believe is some of the most... I'm putting you on. I'm putting you totally on. Like this is the shot, right? Like I want to give you a chance to. I want to have you an opportunity to explain it. What do you believe are some what are your biggest concerns in the elections in Vermont? What do you see as concerns?
Well, one of the first things people say on the other side, people who defend the elections, they say, "Oh, well, there's no evidence of fraud." Well, that's baloney. In fact, the Heritage Foundation, as of last year, had collected over 1,400 confirmed cases of election fraud. Confirmed meaning like there was a court case and a conviction, not like a theory put out on the internet and they thought maybe it was true. No, these are actual convictions, and you can look them up. That number is over a year old now.
In Vermont, this was
no. I think this is national.
Okay.
This is for these are national numbers, and I believe I'll have to double check this, but this is roughly going back like a decade, so like the early 2010s. So that's a lot of election fraud, documented, confirmed election fraud across the nation. Now people say, well, they don't find anything in Vermont then. But my response to that is Vermont has looser election laws, looser standards for running the mail-in ballots and whatnot than the states that are actually catching it some of the time. Who knows how much it's actually going on in true scope. But I point people to that Heritage Foundation website for the ones who say, oh, no, it doesn't happen. Yes, it does happen, and it's very much documented. It's not a lot documented in Vermont, unfortunately, and my feeling about that is because the rules are so loose in Vermont, it's actually nearly impossible to catch. I'll give an example. On the Morning Drive radio show about 2 or 3 years ago, Jim Kondos, the former Secretary of State, was on the radio interviewing, and they were talking. This is back when they were first pushing. They had just implemented the mass mail-in ballots where they mail them to everybody as long as you're on the voter registration list, and that's a whole other issue that we could go on a tangent on, but I won't.
That's a whole other thing. Yeah, I could talk more about that too, actually.
Yeah. So somebody called into the short of it is somebody called into the show and they said, look, I live in an apartment building and I saw these kids come in. They took all these ballots from the mailboxes. They gathered them up together and then they stuffed them in a bag and ran out the door. And this was on like one of the top talk radio shows in Vermont, Morning Drive. It's still in the archives. I checked as recently as a few months ago. You have to, dig through their archives to find it. But there's only so many interviews with Jim Kondos, so you can find it. And the caller calls in. And so naturally you think, okay, well, Jim Kondos is going to investigate this, right? He's going to put his top people on it. They're going to find out what happened. What was this caller talking about? None of that happened. No. There is no such thing. And many people who I've shared this story with have pointed out, look, Mike, there's nothing. There'd be no way to catch them anyway, even if you wanted to, because how are you going to find this person? Did you get a good shot? Did anybody see this person on camera? Probably. Maybe they did, but it wasn't followed up on. There was no reports that ever came out of the office from Kondos while I was there. As far as I'm aware, there were no reports on this incident. And so that's just one example, and there are more examples in Vermont of things that have happened that I think have just gone uninvestigated. But
well, you mentioned before you move on from condos, you were talking to Guy and I about condos the other day at the Wayside when we went to go have breakfast. And well, there was something you said. You're talking about he decided not to run again a couple of years ago, but then there was another person you mentioned.
Oh, Will Senning. He also left. He was he's the director of elections, was the director of elections. I don't know if he's officially left office or not. I think he has. I think there's a new person in there now who I'll have to learn about. But Will Senning also was another advocate for the mail-in ballots and everything. Yeah. Would say like it's a conspiracy if you question anything. There's another important stat I want to mention for anybody who says, oh, that's a conspiracy theory or whatnot. Some people might think I sound like the fringe right now, but if you look at polling by places like, not Gallup, but Gallup's one of them. I'm trying to think. Rasmussen. Yeah, Rasmussen, the polling company, has done several polls over the years since 2020 on what does the American public think about election integrity in the nation. And the results are, I am actually the majority with these concerns. It sounds like I might be a minority fringe based on what you read in the mainstream media, but this is like a 3-year-old number now. Within like 1 year after the 2020 election, something like 75 to 80% of all Americans, so this is obviously bipartisan, believe that fraud was impacting the outcome of our federal elections. Yeah. As recently as like a year ago, 40%, 4 in 10 Americans outright think 2020 was stolen.
Yeah. How many? 40%?
It's up to 40% as of like a year ago.
Wow.
And that number nearly doubles if you change the question to, do you think fraud is impacting our federal elections? So I'm not the minority here, and that's why I've been a little. I felt okay to be a little brave here and talk about some of these things when no one else did, because I can see the American public's got my back. Everybody's concerned about this.
I mean, it's, what is it, 86 million votes, the most votes in history of the presidential elections gone to Joe Biden. I mean, literally one of the least popular presidents in American history. I just have such a hard time believing that election was legit. But hey, that's just me.
No, likewise. And I have a feeling that even though I think unfortunately, the same weaknesses and vulnerabilities are in our national elections, it feels like they're not going to be able to steal it away this time because of the way momentum is going.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot more to because I think that I've heard a lot of people talk a lot about this. Is the first time that Trump won, and this is just me. I'm not saying this is my beliefs. I'm just having a conversation here. There's a lot of people who say the first time Trump won that they cheated in the election, but they didn't cheat enough so that they could beat Trump.
I believe that as well.
I've heard that, and he still managed to win the electoral college because the electoral college, he didn't win the popular vote, but he still won. So then in 2020, they first of all, COVID happened, which I mean,
so then you had the mail-in ballot thing, which they piggybacked on that.
Yes, which I'm of the believer that the people that control the world and run the world, they released this virus.
Right. Well, that's confirmed now, right? Then they pretty much settled now that came from a lab, right?
Well, I think it's confirmed, and I think that there's a growing conversation that we need to be prosecuting Fauci. I mean, we'll come back to this, but I guess my point is like, they did everything they possibly could to ensure that Trump would not win in 2020. And for that matter, I mean, we can talk all day. I don't believe that Trump is a establishment necessarily. Do I believe, kind of like Elon Musk, he has some connections, and maybe he's playing a part he's not quite sure the role that he's playing.
I feel sometimes. Yep.
I'm not so sure that he's I don't think he's like a stand-up Christian by any means, for that matter, and he's not like I just don't understand sometimes how he's become the right wing's hero. But all of that aside, I do believe that COVID was one of the tools that they used to try to take him out, and it worked. And ultimately, now what you have is after COVID, you have the worst American economy potentially since 2008. It's probably, I think it's even worse.
Yeah,
I think it's even worse, the economy as a whole.
I have a stat on this I can share.
Sure. But I guess what I'm trying to say here, my point in saying all of this is, like, there's obviously this like little group, this little freaking cult of people who have so much power and control and money in this country and nationally, internationally, that they can literally, rig entire elections, whether it's just about fraud. Let's talk about the fact that they censored specific information about Joe Biden and his son. They censored all that information on Facebook.
Came out with that big laptop story, and they were the only ones that apparently were able to report it. Everyone else was given the red light.
Exactly. So it's like there's just like all these different ways where they use their means of control, their tentacles, if you will, to suppress and censor important information. Yeah. And I'm not a big Trump guy. Let me be very clear. Like, I personally, you and I have talked a little bit about this online before. It's like, I like RFK Jr. I'm more apt.
I like RFK Jr. too. I do.
I'm more apt to support him in a presidency. I do see some problems there too, like anybody. But and I think that's what people have to realize about politics, is that there's no such thing as like this golden goose, right? Like
everybody's got something in their closet.
Everybody's got something in their closet, and for that matter, I don't even think that's a fair way to put it, because not to knock you, but I think it's just like, no person is perfect, and you could take any person and say, well, I don't like that connection that they have, but somebody else would really like that connection. So anyhow, what's the stat that you have? I'm sorry, I just ranted there.
Just to back up, well, two things you said that I want to back up. First, the notion that Hillary may have tried to steal the election from Trump. I interviewed, or no, it wasn't my interview, although I did interview the lady at a different point. Bev Harris of blackboxvoting.com. She's one of the leading experts in election fraud in the nation. She's a lifelong Democrat. I don't know if she's still a Democrat, but she, as of like 10 years ago, she was a Democrat. So I point that out only to say this is not like a Trump cheerleader or like a conservative cheerleader. They're actually coming from the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
She said that the Hillary camp stole at least 5 states from Trump, and that it was a total blowout, and they tried to take it from him, but they couldn't steal enough to make it happen. That's coming from a Democrat-led election watchdog, and another separate Democrat-led election watchdog whose name is slipping me right now. I apologize, but a different organization that also clarified to me that they're not Trump cheerleaders or anything like that. They were experts on the electronic voting, and they said the big thing is there should never be an electronic voting machine between the voter and the ballot. So, in other words, there's a difference between a tabulator, which happens after you fill out the ballot and then you put it in the machine. That's different. A lot of Vermont uses machines where you actually vote on the machine, and that apparently is a big no-no, according to election integrity experts. You should not have an electronic machine between that ballot and that voter.
I just don't understand. I've always said this. Why not just have both, and then compare them, and then just compare at the end and say, okay, if it's really off, maybe we should recount, or if it's really close, all right, let's recount. But I really don't understand what the discrepancy is. It's just like, we don't. I don't know. So, I guess maybe you and I both should volunteer to count votes this coming fall and see what happens.
It's like the most common. I mean, I'm not saying there can't be shenanigans in whatever system you have, but wouldn't you think, for example, the electronic voting that I just described? All right, let's say, I've just thought of this, daydreaming to myself. Let's say this machine that you punch in, I vote for so-and-so, it should just print out a couple of receipts, and that would solve everything. A receipt for the voter that you keep and take home, a receipt for, the office.
That's a good idea.
Maybe even a receipt for every party head that's supposed to be watching, as an election watcher. So that way everybody gets a copy. Everybody can compare and say, okay, Mike Bielawski voted this way, and here we've got 4 separate copies. The Republican leaders got one, the Democrat leaders got one, the clerk's got one, Mike's got one. Everybody can go and say, okay, Mike definitely voted these votes. But they don't do that. You would think that would be the most common sense fix to all of it.
Well, that's the problem, Mike, is common sense. You know what they say about common sense these days. So Timothy Page writes, Vermont needs condos, not condos.
Oh, condos.
What do you mean by that? I think I know what you mean by that. Very clever. Very clever. Yes, we do need housing. So, okay, we're about an hour in.
Okay.
I think before we go, let's just stay where we are a little bit, I guess. Well, maybe not. How do you think Vermont has ended up this way? How has it become the safe haven for think about it, like literally like all of the worst shit? Sorry, guy, I didn't mean it. But seriously, the petri dish for the worst of the worst ideas.
Yeah.
You have Bernie Sanders and him pushing socialism.
Yeah.
Which I mean, back in the old days, from what I hear, the way that he used to describe it, maybe it was kind of like a new cool idea. Blah blah blah. But you have socialism. You have all of the LGBTQ narratives. They're so popular here. Yeah. You have all of the environmental BS that we deal with. And then ultimately, like communism and state control of everything as a whole. How did we end up in this place? Maybe you don't have an answer to that, but it's what about here is so attractive to like evil? Like honestly,
I know. I think about this a lot. I got here in 2014, so I don't know exactly how we got here. I was in Korea, New York City, and Seoul, and all these different places before I got here. But I suspect it's. I'm going to try to give the benefit of the doubt here and say Vermonters are almost too nice.
Yeah.
Like they're so kind, they're so good-hearted that they cannot believe that when somebody comes to them from the state house or an activist group and says, we need to flip over our economy to save the earth, cost be damned, to save the children, and Vermonters' hearts melt. They're like, oh yes, we have to build wind turbines, we have to build solar panels. I'm going to go buy an electric car right now.
Yeah, we'll do whatever it takes.
We'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And because they're so kind-hearted, literally to a fault. If they were just a little bit more critical and skeptical of humanity in a healthy way, they would say, wait a minute, what do you mean you want us to pay 5 more times for electricity to save the earth, and yet they're placing all these thermometers at the UN on top of tin roofs and in urban areas? What's going on? What's really going on here?
Well, yeah, I think your point is 100% the truth. It's like my I think of my family, like my grandparents and just other people who live in Vermont for long time. I think they always kind of had an idea of a lot of the people that would come to them and come to Vermont for that matter. They always had these kind of thoughts about, the do-gooders and the flatlanders and all that, all those phrases. And I think a lot of them for a long time, they were very skeptical. And then for whatever reason, it started to just shift, especially as more and more people from out of state came here. I was just going
to say that part. Yeah,
as more and more people came here, it just totally took over and dominated the conversation. And for that matter, I think it not to answer my own question here, but I was just thinking out loud and based off of what you were talking about. It's I think Vermont attracts that kind of person because it's known as a place where that type of person is.
Yeah.
But I do think there's hope for Vermonters. I really do. I think there's a lot
of waking up going on.
There's a lot of waking up going on. I see it day to day, just different people coming to me asking questions that they would never have asked me a year ago or even a few months ago for that matter.
Yeah.
I think even at the state level, you're seeing the governor making some statements and doing some things that we've never seen him do. I think that he's always been somewhat aware of a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, but he's played the game, as they say, played the game, which I think has gotten a lot of us into the situation for that matter. By the way, I will also add, I think that one of the biggest reasons we're in the situation that we're in is because everybody plays the game and nobody's willing to break the mold and actually.
I hate to cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good.
Didn't one lawmaker actually say that to you recently?
What's that?
like, I have to play the game, man. Like at the state, you don't have to say whose name it is, but
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Something about on Twitter you posted. You're like, I was just talking to like a legislator or something about something they were doing that they probably shouldn't be doing, and their answer to you was something along the lines
I have to play the game.
Right.
Yeah. Well, they constantly say that to me as a justification for doing the worst shit. It's like I just don't understand. Why are they all so afraid of like these loony people who are like they're just like let's be honest, like they're kind of sad people that could like control us, like, and that's why they cling to this, is because they have nothing else going on. Like they don't have a happy home life. It seems like, anyway, I'm not speaking for anybody, but like a lot of them don't have a happy home life. They maybe have had issues with their family in the past, so they're like fleeing that to come here. Like I see that as a pretty common case for a lot of
addicted to media and like video games and stuff.
Well,
they play like 4 hours a day.
Or that potentially, but I don't know. I think a lot of people are just like they're just like these certain types, but I guess my point is, like, anyone worth their salt, anyone who has like even a little bit of a heart, who's a little bit afraid, or a little bit of a free thinker and speaker that's in that building, they're constantly saying, "Oh, God, play the game," and it's just like, well, if you stop playing the game, you might find that there are potentially thousands of other people who are saying, I am so tired of playing the game. I just want to be authentic. I want to be myself. I want to vote the way that I want to vote. I want to talk about the things that I want to talk about. And actually, like, more people like me when I'm just me. I've found that that's the case for myself. So
I've had that same experience. I've lost a lot of friends since 2020, but I've gained new ones who are a lot more sincere.
Well, that I would say I've lost a lot of people who fine, but I've lost them and I've won them back in some regards, which is like I'm proud of that, because that meant not only, well, my ego is so thankful. Oh, I was right. Haha, I was right. Yeah, now you believe me. Well, no, I was able to help some people see the things that I was seeing. And I'll add, to see what I've seen and experience what I've experienced, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, because you probably can speak to this too. It's tough to go through. Yeah. Because it's a lot of the stuff that you thought you knew and thought you understood, you got to question, and that's not an easy thing to do. And I think that's why a lot of people are very hesitant to do it. But to have people come back to you, especially loved ones,
like, hey, I remember you saying that a few years ago.
Yeah, maybe you were right. It's like, you know what? Thank you, and I hope that continues, because I do put in a lot of work to make sure that we're honest. I mean, and especially the Daily Chronicle, like, we need to be the best of the best.
I'm trying to like really really support the Chronicle. Well, obviously I'm working there now, and I'm giving them 16 articles a month, like more than that if you count the Keep Vermont Safe stuff runs there too. Yeah. And you're producing great videos and also articles, and this is awesome.
We just got to keep it going, man.
Yeah. I hate to make it dorky again, but to be frank, it feels like God's work.
No. It actually, there's nothing dorky about that. I feel the same way. Guy and I, as people that maybe are close to us, they might know, we have some pretty strong religious beliefs. I do. Right. And as I've gotten into this work, and as I've spent more time at the State House, like, it's just amazing how God is speaking through us and giving us this vision and this insight to see the things that we see, and then giving us the opportunity to then turn around and explain it to our brothers and sisters, man, because that is really what we are. Right. It's as a big human family, and we have a responsibility to ensure that we can maintain that and not be taken over and controlled by these because that is what it is. It's very strong spiritual forces. It just is. Like, we can talk about it all day about the 3D reality, but there's more to it than what we can see.
I think there's a lot of parallels too. Like, I know not everybody's religious or Christian, but there's still whatever you believe of that. Jesus was apparently a real person nonetheless, and he had a very interesting life. And I did a little bit of research on what they actually know about his life in recent years. And he was a rabble-rouser. Yeah, he was. He overturned tables at the palace. He had...
literally.
He was supported by disgruntled elites who were upset with the way society was going, and they needed somebody to sort of be the front man to take on the establishment. And that's what he did. And then it became, all the religious stuff came in. And that's great, too, because it does feel like it's God's work.
Well, and I think what he did... is when you talk about the rebel rouser, I mean, he literally went into the Jewish temples and overthrew the tables where they were counting. I believe it was taxes.
Yeah, something like that.
I'm pretty sure that's the story. It's like it was just I don't want to speak and be wrong, but I will say
I remember that story right with the temple where there's some kind of business going on that wasn't supposed to be at the temple, and he was not thrilled to see it. But I look at a lot of stories in the Bible now, and I'm like, wait, that makes sense. I'm like,
I will tell you. I've said this before. I've said it online, and I'll say it again. If you had told me that I would find God at the State House, I never would have believed you. Yeah. But it became very clear this year the difference between good and evil.
Yeah.
And that's something that. Once again, to go through what I've gone through to see that clearly, I don't wish it upon anybody. I'm thankful for the journey. Mm-hmm. But for that matter,
so fulfilling though.
I'm sorry.
It's so fulfilling though when you stand up for humanity and God, or whether you believe in God or not, when you just stand up for humanity, it's so powerful and fulfilling, and it actually becomes, for lack of a better term, fun. And
it does become fun.
And I start to look forward to shows like this, and even sitting down to write the articles. It sounds like a boring thing to do, and sometimes it is, but more often than not, I'm like, okay, I'm informing people about this really important thing that they're not being, necessarily told the truth about.
Well, and I think that's why you and I are also so lucky, is because we do have this boss, and he says he's not our boss, which I mean,
yeah,
he is, man, and I want him to be, and Guy is just such a special person in so many respects. And he's probably like, oh, listen to these two talking me up on the show, but I mean, in so many respects, he's such a special person because he's taken us on. And he knows that. I think that's why we all click so well together, is because we just all share these strong, powerful beliefs. And there's sometimes we don't even have to talk about certain things. We just know, and that's just so incredible.
Right.
And, I think that's something that the fact that we're here in Vermont and we're doing this thing, we're just what we essentially are as a media organization is an apparatus for something that doesn't otherwise exist. And meaning like there's all this energy right now. I think there's a lot of people who they're lost, they're scared, they feel disconnected from nature, disconnected from God. And I think that we're this organization where we're bringing light to all these subjects, and we're giving the opportunity, we're making space, we're holding space for these people that are finding their way, and I think that's the thing. Guy and I have also had this conversation a lot too, where it's like, we feel like, oh, we're like half one foot in the world and half in the kingdom of God. And it's like, where do you draw that balance? And I guess how we can do that is bringing more and more people to our platform, and doing his work. So I don't know, that just honestly feels great to talk about live on air with you.
Yeah. The Bible says, and again, you don't have to believe in religion at all to get the thought behind this in the Bible. They said man is made in the image of God. Now, let's just say, for argument's sake, you don't believe in God. That's still a powerful statement, because it's essentially saying you are hardwired at your DNA to represent like the center. Well, let's say you're not religious, the center of the universe, and call it
the Big Bang.
We are, right.
Yeah.
We are like the original DNA of whatever was supposed to be. The personification of God.
And you can draw upon that. You can literally draw upon that. Like I think about time as a linear thing, which it isn't necessarily. And the fact that we were created in the image of God, like we can literally tap right into our DNA.
Right.
And like that's where the concept I think of the Holy Spirit really comes from too, is that it lives within us, and we were created from the beginning.
Yeah.
And we still have that in us. Like, it's so mind-blowing to think, like, in all of human history, thousands and thousands of years ago, there were just like human beings out there that I'm related to, that lived in Rome, and or wherever, Rome.
I try to think about that sometimes. I'm like, I wonder who my great uncle was doing at this time. Like,
Did he ever meet Jesus? Yeah, I mean, like.
That would be fun. Unfortunately, I guess it's impossible.
But in that sense, we're all connected. We are all connected, and I believe that there's some statistic too, where it's like, you're only ever like 40th cousins with every human on the planet. Like, you're literally like.
That's neat. I never thought of that.
Like, it's not that. I mean, that's still quite a distance, but like you could
trace. Not as far as I thought, though.
No, and once again, like reading the Bible, like they take the time to go through these huge lineages where they just go like on and on and on. Like, this brother, this was, I don't want to say anything stupid or offensive, but it's like, like Isaac, the son of Abraham. And it like just goes on and on and on, giving the lineage to like the birth of Christ, for example. And I guess like the reason I'm even saying is like, it's incredible that the lineage, they saw it as important, the people writing the Bible. Like, we can still take that and say it today. Like, sure, there's 7 billion people on planet Earth, but you're still only...
Now, aren't we?
Huh? Is it 8 billion?
I think they've passed 8 like last year or something. I don't know.
So 8 billion people on planet Earth, but you're still like 40th cousins with
that
everybody.
Is kind of neat. I never knew that stat. That's an interesting thing to learn.
It is. I mean, it's just we're all connected, man. And I think that's another thing. Like the work that we're doing. If you do think about the fact that we are all connected, whether or not everybody's seeing it or they're paying attention exactly to what we're doing, the simple fact of the matter, the work that we're doing is being felt across ripples of the space and time of the universe. I mean, we could go on to this whole weird thing, but I'm not going to.
Well, it's good to reflect a little bit on religion and philosophy because it is a spiritual battle, and even if you're not spiritual, it's a philosophical battle. If you're not a spiritual person, to me, it all feels like one and the same. It's there's. Einstein said the universe bends towards justice. I have to tell myself that every day sometimes. That's
a beautiful saying, and I think that's why in all the movies we watch, in the end, the good guys always win.
Yeah, because and even when they don't, if the story continues, it eventually...
the good guys do win. No. Well, I think, you know what? I think that's an incredible place to stop right there.
Okay.
What do you think of that? You have anything else you want to say before we go?
No, I think that... This is a lot of fun. I know we've been on over an hour, but it feels like 10 minutes.
I know, it was a blast. I just want to say before we go, if you are a consistent viewer or a reader of the Vermont Daily Chronicle, please do us a favor and become a sustaining subscriber. I believe it's about $9 a month to subscribe to the Vermont Daily Chronicle. Otherwise, you can read it for free, or make a one-time contribution. The work that we do, we do believe, once again, that it is God's work, and I have no shame in saying that. And we hope that you believe it is too, because this stuff's important, and to keep us going and to keep, Mike and I sustained, especially as we head into the future. I want to continue doing this work. I know that Tim Page, he's one of viewers right now. I know he wants to. And if you're not already a subscriber, please become one. If you're not already subscribing to the Vermont Daily Chronicle YouTube page and you're watching it there, please subscribe to us there. Like us on Facebook. Like us on Twitter. Or follow us on Twitter. And feel free to share everything that we do. Please, please. I probably should have said this earlier in the show. But anyhow, folks, I'm just going to wrap that up. Mike, you want to say goodbye to the camera?
Goodbye, and thanks for watching.